Friends for empty phones, just like Hello friends, I just came in from work. I'm quite tired. And what I want to do now is make myself some lunch for tomorrow. And you might be asking me, why would I be making lunch for tomorrow, seeing as it's in the evening? Well, what I'm going to use is something called a slow cooker. And this slow cooker is my mom's old slow cooker. She's had it for decades, but it still works absolutely fine. It's a really wonderful way to make a stew or soup or cook beans, and it uses very low heat. So in places like Morocco, they make a tagine, right? And that's like a clay dish, and they put it on top of some firewood, and they cook the food very slowly. And whether it's vegetables or meat, then it makes the taste very, very, very full. But also it keeps all the nutrition in the food. But today I'm making a special kind of stew. What I'm making is rebellion stew for surviving the American tariffs. So as you know, then Donald Trump decided he wants to tariff Canada, to punish us for allowing less than 1% of fentanyl into America, and also allowing less than 1% of the immigrants into America. And it has to be said that that less than 1% of fentanyl coming into America from Canada that they seize is being carried by American citizens. So I don't know how he wants to punish us. I think really what he wants is our resources. He wants our oil and our water, etc. So basically Canadians are going to stick together. And what a lot of people are doing is they're going into the grocery store and they're finding Canadian-made things. So what I have here is all of the food I could find that was grown in Canada or otherwise not grown in the US. And a lot of the stuff we import comes from the US. And so I had a look around, and the first thing I found was this squash. Now squash is absolutely delicious, and for this kind of weather it's absolutely perfect food. And this one is grown, it's organic, it's grown, and it comes from Canada, probably even British Columbia. And then also leeks. I don't know if you've ever had leeks. In the monastery we don't eat these, but they're very tasty, so we'll use those. Got some courgette, or I guess you call it zucchini here. It's nice. Something else. Beetroot. Lovely flavor for a stew. Yeah. Some red potatoes as well. Be very tasty. An organic red onion. And then the tomatoes, well, they come from Mexico. But that's fine, because Canada, Mexico, we're friends, right? We're trading partners. We want to be trading partners with the US, but they don't want to be trading partners with us. They want to tariff us. And the other thing I found really nice are some organic brown mushrooms. And the thing about mushrooms is that mushrooms have a hell of a lot of protein in them. They're very good and very tasty. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've got to peel and cut up all this veg, obviously, and we're going to put it in the slow cooker. But for the onion, what we need to do is just fry it a little bit. It's better if you do, because the onion has a kind of bitter, acidic, kind of gassy taste to it. And if you fry it a little bit before you put it in the stew, then it will lose that strange flavor. Be more tasty. I don't really have a good knife here. All the good knives are in my mother's place. And I'm sorry for the mess, but this is my cabin. And aside from that, I don't have any time to clean up. I have got somebody coming here to meditate next week, so I've just got to clean up. I've got no choice. But for now, it's a building site. So we're just going to slice these onions. You know, really, you don't have to cut these fancy at all. For a nice stew in a slow cooker, you can just put big chunks of things in. But I'm just going to slice the onions a bit because I want to fry them off before I put them inside. Now the nice thing about this slow cooker is that you can cook pulses in it, like legumes, you know, the hard beans. And normally you have to soak them. You have to soak them, and you have to like soak them without salt, pre-cook them. If you put them in a slow cooker, you don't have to soak them at all, and you can add salt, everything in it, and you leave it in there for 8 hours overnight, then it makes perfect beans, really nice homemade baked beans. I might show you that recipe one time. With maple syrup especially is nice. But we're just going to make a stew today. And so we need a little bit of oil. This is a nice enameled iron skillet. I like that. I prefer that to the non-stick. I don't like non-stick stuff. Whenever you see cooking programs, then they always try to sell you non-stick stuff. The chefs are like promoting whatever it is, their brand of prestige or whatever type of frying pan it is. And often they're non-stick, but really in a real kitchen you don't use non-stick because it doesn't last. I had a restaurant, I had a kitchen, and the non-stick stuff is just destroyed in like, 5 minutes if you use it. So stainless steel is the best. So again, to test the pan, take a little bit of onion, put it in the pan, and when it starts to sizzle, it's ready. In the meantime, we're going to peel some of this veg. Now, the difficult one to handle is the squash, because it's got this hard outer casing. And many people get put off by pumpkins and squashes, but they're really nice, beautiful flavor, and they're not that difficult to use. What I tend to do is I cut them into slices and then take the skin off there. If you roast this squash, then you can just clean the outer skin and you can eat the skin, especially if it's an organic one. And the skin itself is very tasty. But for this, I need to take the skin off. So I'm going to cut it into manageable pieces. And we can get rid of the gunk in the middle. Got a recycled pot there, plastic pot. Use that. Scoop out inside stuff. So of course, if you're into seeds and things, then you can roast these, and they're really tasty. But you have to clean them really well, and you have to dry them out. It's better in hot countries because you can leave them out in the sun. Get rid of the inside of that. Don't know if you can hear that, but the pan is sizzling, so I'm going to put the onions in there, and we'll put them on a low heat. The slower you cook them, the more tasty they will be. For this recipe, you don't need to fry anything else. Just sweat the onions slowly. So that's one organic red onion, one butternut squash, and then I can just take the skin off that. The skin is quite nice roasted even, or deep fried. You can make a little snack out of the skin. And if not, then put it in your compost heap. Eventually, once the retreat is up and running, we will have a horticultural area, and we'll also do some videos about horticulture. As you know, it's my intention to make a kind of permaculture, or maybe 75% permaculture retreat, as much as we can. And so that means we have to do a bit of growing of stuff. As I said before, the important thing is that if you've got a meditation retreat, is you don't want people working too much because they won't practice. So if it was full-blown agriculture for a lot of people, it means you're going to be spending a hell of a lot of time gardening. You don't want that. You want to spend a bit of time in the garden, because when you're meditating, you need a little bit of work to keep the body fit and to stop you from getting a bit dull, kind of foggy and spaced out. So a bit of work, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, and usually it's hard work. The Christian monks also did this. They really believe in hard work. It's really good for settling the mind. The Zen monks as well. They all have chores, and they apply themselves to that. A lot of mindfulness, whether it's chopping wood, carrying water, whatever it is. They do it mindfully, and they exert themselves. You know, we didn't have all kinds of machines in the olden days, so we had no choice but to do it by hand. But you need this. You need to get the energy going in the body, especially if you've been in retreat all winter. It's damp and cold. You need to get the blood circulating. So we're just softening these onions, giving them a little bit of color. Once they're in the slow cooker, then the onions will break down and all their flavors will go into the stew. This rebellion stew or resistance stew is a way that we can use our local Canadian ingredients. And like, even if we wanted to buy American stuff, it's going to become much more expensive because of the trade war. So either way, you've got to kind of like find the things that are grown locally. And that's good for the local community, right? I've always really been into using local things. When I had a restaurant, it was an organic restaurant, vegetarian restaurant in Cornwall, then we always tried to use local produce. And it might be, sure, it might be a little bit more expensive. If you go to the superstore or something like that, well, you've got to drive, right? You've got to pay for gasoline, petrol as we call it in Britain. If you just destroy your local environment, you don't rely on your local stuff, everybody goes out of business, then you've got no choice except for to be beholden to these big corporations and organizations. And this is also an issue if you're concerned about the environment. Like, I'm looking in the grocery store for the stuff that's comes from Canada because of Trump's trade war. But if I was thinking about what was environmentally sound, what was best for the environment, then I would also be looking for local things because they have a much smaller carbon footprint. I know lots of people think there's no such thing as climate crisis. Of course, they're kind of gullible, right? They just believe whatever they read on Twitter. But if you're concerned about the environment, then you should look at the labels and buy less things. For example, things that come from far away. So again, we can just put this stuff directly into the slow cooker. Really, slow cooking is a wonderful way to cook. It's so easy. Even if you don't want to fry the onions beforehand, you can just throw garlic, onions, everything in. And then just leave it overnight. Okay, now we've got some beetroots here. These have to be peeled. When you peel beetroot, what you find is your hands are going to get completely red, but it's okay. The other thing that's very interesting is that in the past, then we had no choice, right, but to eat what was seasonal. And there's a theory going around that this is naturally better for our digestion, for our well-being. So in winter, in Britain, places like that, the only stuff that would grow are rutabagas, you know, parsnips, these root vegetables, heavy root vegetables, cabbage maybe, that sort of thing. So you have to rely on these. And it's also more healthy for you. But what we do is, we think, in the middle of winter, we think, oh, I quite fancy a banana, or I want a pineapple, right? And it's like not natural. It's not a natural way for us to eat. And they say, some people say, it's detrimental to your health. So when I went in the shop, and then I looked, I want to have a look, what of all of this produce is made in Canada? And the things I found actually really stimulated my appetite. I thought, oh, beetroot. Beetroot sounds nice. Now it's cold, wintry, and I always love mushrooms. If you're a vegetarian, they're really important. They've got lots of protein in them. Did you know that mushrooms are made from the same stuff that insects are made from? It's called chitin or something like that. That's why it's got protein in it. And if you cook them slowly, then they got loads of flavor. The Korean monks, they eat quite a lot of mushrooms. All sorts of different mushrooms. Really tasty. Marinated, pickled, fried. 3 small beetroots in there. Put my work glove on. Put the onions in there. Water's off because the taps are frozen. I can wash these in there. I think the potatoes, we'll just put them in and put the skins on. Like that. Fine. A bit the wash. Quarter them, chuck them in. You can put whole onions in these things, in this slow cooker. If you have shallots or onions, you can just throw the whole thing in without frying it. And it gets really soft and tasty. Nice to make a big pot of stew. And in this kind of weather, it lasts for ages. If I was here for a week, I could make a big pot like that. And it would last me most of the week. And it wouldn't go off. Chuck it in there. Now if we're going to have enough room. We're going to put some mushrooms in there. People get a bit paranoid about mushrooms because they know they're grown in manure. If you wash them or soak them, they're not very nice. So if you take a tea towel, some paper towel, and you just rub them with some water, it takes the muck off. But I've been eating mushrooms, like organic mushrooms, without washing them for years. Most people find that quite disgusting. It's never harmed me. In fact, I reckon it's good for you. It's amazing when you think about the amount of dirt that people in the old days had to tolerate. You're literally eating it. And we are so worried about being clean. We can't tolerate getting the slightest bit dirty. My stew pot is a little bit too full. But once it's cooked, once it starts cooking, it's all going to just mush down into juice. So it'll be fine. I don't know if I can fit in those leeks. Let's take one leek maybe. These tomatoes will completely disappear in there once it gets going. It's a funny thing because in the monastery, we don't eat garlic, we don't eat onions. You don't miss it. The way I used to eating, kind of like can't have food without garlic in it. But actually food without garlic is really nice. The Tibetans use very little in their food. It's very simple. They don't add lots of masala, spices and stuff like that, and herbs. But I have to say, the Tibetans eat a lot of meat. And as you know, meat has a very strong flavor. So, and their meat as well, it's all free range meat. All organic free range meat on the side of the mountain. And I'm going to add a bit of black pepper. Half a teaspoon. Definitely need salt. Had some nice Himalayan rock salt in my parents' place, but there's nothing here. Teaspoon of salt. I'm not sure whether I'm going to need this or not, because the vegetables themselves should have an awful lot of flavor, but I'm going to add about a tablespoon of this vegetable bouillon. And the other thing I'm going to put in there, and you can miss this out, is I'm going to put in a bit of fermented tofu. As I said before, then the Koreans, they eat a lot of fermented tofu. It's not necessarily something that Westerners would be familiar with, but it has a very strong flavor. So I'm going to put a couple of pieces of fermented tofu in there, just to give it some extra flavor. That's optional. This is the nice thing about this slow cooked meal, is really you don't even need a recipe. You can just go in your fridge or go to your local grocery store, buy a few organic vegetables, like a whole onion, bit of garlic, bit of ginger, throw it in the pot, put some liquid on it, turn it on, leave it. Next morning, you've got a really delicious stew. And you can eat that with a bit of brown rice or something, or bread, nice homemade bread. Okay, sounds like the kettle's boiling. Got a bit hot water here, and we'll just pour that on and cover the vegetables. Now you could just take any organic herbs you found in the garden or in the local shop and add that in here, some thyme or something. Like I say, the Tibetans, they don't add herbs and things to their food. They make herb tea, but they don't really add herbs to their actual cooking. And it sounds like it would be missing something. But actually, the vegetables themselves have got loads of flavor in them. Now, if it were beans, then you could leave it for 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours if it's just, hard pulses, legumes, about 8 hours, 12 hours. For a stew, vegetable stew, I'd say on low for 6 hours. If you eat meat, then you can add a brisket of beef in there. Just put it straight in cubes, and it will naturally just break down. It will be very stringy and very tasty, but I'm a vegetarian, so I'm going to use a mix of 2 tablespoons each of lentils, barley, green peas, and yellow split peas. I found these in the local health food store. What you have to do is you have to rinse them well with water and drain that off until you get rid of the cloudy liquid. Then once you've got your rinsed legumes, then you can just add it straight into there and stir it in. If you add pulses and beans, then you might have to cook it for a little bit longer. But lentils and barley will cook at the same time as the vegetables. I'll just stir them in. I'll put the lid on that, and then I think I'll leave it until bedtime. When I go to bed, I'll turn it off, and I'll put it back on in the morning, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. Lunchtime, it should be ready. Okay, let's go see what this stew tastes like. Well, let's see how our rebellion stew is doing. It's funny because when I woke up this morning, I heard that Trump had backed out of his idea to start a trade war with Canada and Mexico. Well, he's put it off for another month, so we got to be prepared. I guess his advisors had convinced him that it was a pretty stupid thing to do. Really, it was probably about the dumbest thing a president has ever done in the first month of their presidency. It's not going to help anybody. So, we had that in the slow cooker for about 4 hours before I went to bed, and this morning, about 9 o'clock, I put it back on the heat. Actually, the power went off last night, so I had to leave it on the fireplace, but the power's back on now. And let's have a look at that, see what it looks like. Smells really nice. Let's just stir it up. So again, these were all things I found that were locally produced: butternut squash, beetroot, etc. And I added in a bit of lentils, barley, yellow and green split peas, 2 tablespoons each. So I'm going to take a nice bowl of that. Really, when it's winter like this, when it's cold and crisp, then this is the perfect sort of food to eat. What you want to eat this with is a nice piece of homemade bread and some sour cream or some natural yogurt. I don't have any yogurt or sour cream here. I do have some rye bread though. Now the bread's not homemade, but it'll have to do. A couple pieces of that, a nice wooden spoon, and of course, what I'm forgetting is a bottle of kombucha, homebrew. This one should be ready. Okay, let's take this outside and have our lunch. You know, the funny thing is, I always try to buy American, to buy from our neighbors. It's so important, right? We depend on each other. We're allies. And I prefer to buy American than to buy stuff from China, for example. Especially since I'm a Tibetan Buddhist. I'm not very happy with the way the Chinese have treated the Tibetans. Also, I'm very happy to buy from Mexico. When I get tools, I try to find if I can get the ones that are made in Mexico first. And if I can't find it anywhere else, then I've got no choice. So let's just offer this up to the benefit of all beings. Really, we don't want to be enemies. We need to work together and cooperate Cooperation is much better than competition. Okay, let's have a taste and see what this stew is like. Oh, wow. It is so sweet. I didn't add any sugar, but the butternut squash and the beetroot have a natural sweetness to it with those tomatoes from Mexico. And cooking it slowly means that it's got loads of flavor. Now, I added a bit of fermented tofu. I quite like the flavor. And you can taste it in there. It's very subtle. It's very nice. But you don't have to add fermented tofu. Blueberry and pineapple kombucha. Oh, really refreshing. This is just what I need after working in the forest. The mushrooms have a very firm texture, so it's quite a good substitute for meat. But the flavor is very rich and naturally sweet, not too sweet. In the past, then we always eated simple food like this. So you might just have a little piece of meat in there, a bit of beef or chicken or something like that. And we survived. You know, I think we were happier people, certainly healthier. These days, you've got all the choice in the world, like 20 different types of fast food, right? From all over the world, but it's not good for you. It's got loads of sugar and fat and salt in it. Like there's these things that were genetically programmed to look out for in food, because in the past we were all starving to death, right? When we were kind of cavemen, etc. So if we found ripe fruit on a tree, then our genetic programming would be to eat all of it while you can, get all that nutrition while you can. It means we like sweet things. So of course, the food industry knows that we're addicted to things like salt and sugar and fat. So they hyper-process food and fill it full of these things that are essentially cheap, right? Sugar is cheap, salt is cheap, fat is cheap. Put loads of that in the food, and then we crave it. And it really makes us unhealthy. When I was young, people said that I would suffer greatly in my old age because of being a vegetarian. Some people even suggested that I would get brain damage because my brain wouldn't be able to develop from lacking protein. So I'm nearly 60 now, right? And I don't see any negative effects of my vegetarian diet on my health. But I'm not telling you to be a vegetarian. I'm not telling you to be a vegan. This is a nice vegan stew. It's up to you. Each to their own. Those potatoes are very nice. But what I am suggesting is you take a bit of time off from your social media and the things you normally do in busy city life. Going out for entertainment, watching sports, going out for drinks, going to the cinema, all this continuous stimulation of the sense perceptions. Even if you don't have a car, you can take a bike and you can cycle out into the rural areas, outside of the city somewhere. America's got a lot of big cities, but there's so much natural space in America. It's a little bit more difficult there because you've got so much gun violence. It's not like here in Canada, you can just go wandering off and nobody will bother you. Of course, you've got to be safe. But even if you just go to the local park, feed the ducks, sit on a bench, look at the river or the lake, just commune with nature, touch grass, as they say. A bit of time to be alone with you and your thoughts, and to experience the world as it's meant to be. And my suggestion is, if you do that, you're going to find that you're a lot happier and more stable individual. I mean, the frustration that people experience is palpable. Everybody's so angry and easily triggered. It's not a good sign. I've said it before, if you're spending all your time online trying to troll people and upset them, it's a sign that you're an unhappy person. Ultimately, what does it matter what somebody else thinks? I mean, I think that Donald Trump is making a big mistake, and he's doing a lot to harm his own people. And mistakenly, he believes it's something that he's going to benefit from. But ultimately, he won't go down well in history. But that doesn't mean I hate the people who voted for them. It's their choice. I've got to live with that. You have to understand, it's the most dangerous thing in the world. It's not nuclear bombs, chemical weapons. The most dangerous thing in the world is our anger and our greed and jealousy, pride, these sorts of things. I mean, being Canadian, of course, I'm in for good, sensible gun regulations. You know, we don't send our kids to school wondering if they're going to get shot here. But in order for somebody to go out with an AR-15 and kill loads of people, they essentially need to be quite radicalized, right? It's mental illness. And it seems one of the main factors that radicalizes people these days is social media. And these disinformation super spreaders, like Twitter, that sort of thing. But also many of the influencers online, like Alex Jones, for example, right? I mean, they get sued hundreds of millions of dollars for lying and deceiving people, and they just keep doing it because we love it. We love conspiracy theories. We love seeing people get triggered and angry. We love the outrage. What you don't understand is this anger, this resentment, this outrage will harm you more than anyone else. And on top of harming you yourself, it will harm your loved ones, those people you don't know, and also your enemies. I mean, everybody's complaining about elites these days, but who benefits from us getting radicalized by social media? It's the oligarchs. People like Elon Musk, right? Zuckerberg. They control the narrative and profit from it. And in the meantime, the rest of us are living in fear, dealing with hatred and resentment. What's the remedy? Switch off the damn phone. Step back from the computer. Go for a walk. Sit by the river with your thoughts. I mean, you don't have to meditate, but if you learn to meditate, it's certainly something that's going to benefit you. Eat healthy, natural food. Make a promise to yourself. I'm going to cut out junk food 1 day a week, 2 days a week. If you like donuts, I'm going to have 4 less donuts every week. You just start small and work your way up. Your body will thank you for it. Your mind will thank you for it. You'll be healthier and live longer. In the end, all you have is your own mind. It's your way of thinking. You can have all the wealth in the world,
have a great body, but if you're mentally tormented, you'll never be happy. And happiness comes from within. You can't find it elsewhere. And so the more we crave these external sources of sense pleasure, the more unhappy we become. But nature is our default. And if you commune with nature, if you touch grass, it allows you to reset. It's where we're most comfortable. I mean, we spent millions of years, right? In the forests, in the jungles, in the wild. Living out under the moon. Well, I'm going to give you a headache if I keep going on. And besides, I've got a ferry to catch. Anyway, thank you for sharing lunch with me and keeping me company. I hope that nothing I've said has caused you upset. And on top of that, if possible, that I hope that there's something in there that may be of benefit to you, something you can use practically in your own life to find the peace and tranquility that you desire. See you later.